Welcome in to Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Super excited that you have decided to take the journey of today's episode with me. I am really excited. It is July. It's hard to believe we're already saying July, but here we are. We're in July. So with that means only inevitably September is on the horizon. I know kids are already saying, you're saying the S word. I need the little beep, like beep. Here's where I need your help as a listener. Help me out here. I am looking for the next guests. That's right, plural, guests. I'm looking for the next guest. So maybe that's you. If you're listening right now or you know someone, maybe it's somebody that you play, I don't know, the game Hand and Foot, that card game with. Maybe you're playing cards with them all the time. Or maybe it's somebody you like to play basketball with. Or maybe it's that running buddy. Or maybe it's that workout guy at the gym that you just think, man, that guy has a story, I'm sure. I want to know them. I want to meet them. I want to be introduced to them. So if you could help me out with that, I would just be forever grateful. So how you can do that? Two easy ways. One, you can jump over to our website, opspodcast.com, jump there right after the show, and you can send me some information on somebody that you might know. Second way you can do it, if you don't want to write things down, you can also leave a voicemail straight from the website as well. Super easy, two ways to do that. And of course, you can also reach out to us on social media at OPS Podcast Show under Instagram, Facebook, and the Twitter. So without further ado, Lucas, you know what to do.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome in to Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. What a fantastic month we're having. I don't know about anybody else, but July has been the month of excitement for me. There's always fireworks going on around us, it just feels like. But thank you for joining me today. Just want to say thank you for that. If you haven't already, which I'm trying to still figure out why you haven't, if you haven't already, please visit opspodcast.com. Leave us a rating on the show. We would just love to know what you're loving, what you're hating even. We would just love to know that. Easy to do that. Just hit that connections tab, and you can, of course, do that there. You can leave a voicemail. You can even do a doobly-doo in the message center. We would just love to hear from you. And, of course, follow us on all the social medias, OPS Podcast Show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And sometimes I even hang out at Clubhouse. And so speaking of Clubhouse, it just happened again. Like I'm in this room with another former guest, I always have to say that, Dr. Michelle Bankston. She's a good friend of mine, and she turned us on to this wonderful lady that we're going to speak to all the way from Lubbock, Texas. So let me just give you a rundown of her. So Lubbock, Texas, yes, Buddy Holly, Red Raiders, that's where we are right now, in case you were wondering. Texas is just amazing. We get a lot of great, amazing people from there. So here she is, again, from Lubbock, Texas. She is a wife, which is always important. I always like to say that. 33 years of marriage, fantastic, to this wonderful guy, Eldon. We're going to hear about him, I'm sure, I hope. She's also a mom of 2 adult sons, always important to remember. So she's had little ones, but now they're adults. Exciting stuff there. She's an author. She's a blogger. She's actually an online columnist too, which is kind of fun. Her posts have appeared in a variety of places. You could probably go find those, and we'll hear more about that, I'm sure. She's also been a speaker at conferences, at retreats. We all know this one too. The Virtual Summit. Yeah, she's done those as well. And here we go. For those of you who are maybe scholarly, she's a Bible teacher. So listen up. And in fact, speaking of the Bible, she's been teaching it for more than 15 years. Not only has she been speaking on it, she's been doing lessons. She, in fact, has put together some of those great, amazing teachings for the groups that she's been a part of. But here's the really cool thing about her. She's also an author. I mentioned that, but here's why she's an author. See, she wrote this amazing book, which we're going to kind of dig into a little bit as well, which is, the book is called Appeal to the Courtroom of Heaven. Now, I don't know about anybody else. That just begs some questions, and we're going to have to sit around that with petitions for prisoners and prisoners' families. So we're going to kind of sit around that. So if you're wondering why she's here, well, that's kind of a little bit there. So her and her husband, they have started this amazing nonprofit foundation. We're going to hear about that as well. Fortunes of Hope Ministries. So excited to talk to her about that. So help me again welcome her in from Lubbock, Texas, Shonda Whitworth. Shonda, how are you today?
I am great, Neil. I have not heard myself introduced so fabulously like that. That you make me sound like a superstar.
Well, I think I really steal a little bit from Jimmy Kimmel. Like when not Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon. I like him better. Jimmy Fallon. Like I love Jimmy Fallon. He's such a crack up or, kookaburra kind of guy like me. And so when I started hearing, him doing introductions of people, I'm like, you know what? I need to do a better job of interviewing people and introducing them when they come on, because I feel like we're like, and, here they are from Lubbock, Texas. We got to have some fanfare. We got to have excitement. And I always say, we roll out the red carpet for people. We even vacuum it out, So there we go.
That was fabulous. You did much better than Fallon. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So getting into your story, I'm excited about Lubbock, Texas, because I'm a big, believe it or not, I know this sounds really weird because I'm young. I'm 41 young, but I do love me some Buddy Holly. I really do. Like I do. People doubt that, but I'm serious. Like I'll show you the playlist. I got proof. I love Buddy Holly. Are you a fan? Do you have to be a fan of Buddy Holly being in Lubbock, or how does that work?
I hope not, because I live in Lubbock and I couldn't even tell you one of his songs right now. So
I'll help you. That'll be the day that I die.
Okay. Yes, yeah, I know that one.
You know that one. And of course, Peggy Sue, everyone knows that one, but.
Yes, I know that one. So I do know some of his songs.
Yeah.
I just didn't put his name to it.
Yeah, and she was a real person. A lot of people don't know that either, but she, in fact, was a real person. And she was, in fact, named Peggy Sue. So anyway, all right, back to you. So coming from Lubbock, Texas, and being in that Texas area, we got to know what style of shoes we're wearing. Being a lady, and I've heard this from so many other people, that I cannot ask a lady's shoe size. Will you just put that to rest once and for all for me? Can I? Can I not? What do you think on that?
Well, I'd rather you ask my shoe size than my dress size. So I'll take the shoe size question.
I'm telling you what, at least we're not saying in other people's dresses. I would be awkward because I don't wear a dress. Anyway, so style of shoe. We'll stick with style of shoe. What style of shoe do you like to wear?
I'm a flip-flop girl. It's summer, and I love to wear flip-flops. It's the closest to being barefoot because I'd rather be barefoot.
Yeah, see, I can't get behind flip-flops. I just can't. And I have a feeling like the first shoe company that's going to come knocking at our door to say, hey, we're ready to give you some endorsement dollars, some, what do they call it? Affiliate marketing links and all that stuff. I have a feeling the first company that's going to come to me is going to be a flip-flop company. And I'm going to just be like, pass. No, thank you.
No, I understand they're not for everybody because not everybody likes the between the toe thing, but it doesn't bother me. So I like flip-flops.
All right, cool. All right, so we got some flip-flops on today, which is good because we're in the hot and heat of Texas, so good to go there. So here's my question. If we were to come hang out with you and me and your husband and my wife, we'll bring my wife along, what are we going to go and do in your area, and what's something fun that you like to go out and do?
Well, since you're a Buddy Holly fan, we'll take you to the Buddy Holly Museum. It's right down the road. I've been there with another friend when she came to visit, so I know where it's at. And it just blends in with the rest of Lubbock. But yes, we'll go see the Buddy Holly Museum, where his house was, and all the fantastic things they have in there about Buddy Holly. So if you want to go see that, we'll go see that.
I feel like, and I know we talked Texas Tech. Now, I know there's a famous guy that has played football at Texas Tech. A lot of people don't know this either. And I think he might be named Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if you're a fan or not, but he also played at Texas Tech. So there's...
Everybody in Lubbock loves Patrick Mahomes. He still even shows up in Lubbock on local commercials because he loves Lubbock and Lubbock loves Patrick Mahomes. And because Patrick Mahomes went to Kansas City, we're all Kansas City fans too.
There you go. It's a full circle now. We got it all. So let's go to the museum. That sounds fun. All right. So if we're going to talk about stuck moments, now I know you as a mom and as a wife and just all the things that you've been a part of. There have got to be a few moments in your life that you have really felt like, that was a stuck moment. And venturing to guess even, you've probably seen the movie Cinderella. A time or two, right?
Maybe once or twice. I raised boys, so we really didn't watch Cinderella.
But you remember it probably, as a young lady, right? Okay.
Yes,
all right,
I remember.
Just checking. So one thing about Cinderella that has always kind of plagued me was the fact that, one, she had animals not only talking to her, singing to her, but helping her, but she really was stuck. And I don't think she realized that she was stuck. I think she thought she was, maybe, but not really. But do you have that moment where you know for a fact you were stuck? And if so, what was that like?
Well, the moment in my life where I was stuck was a season of our life after our oldest one grew up and our youngest one still lived at home. I felt, I've done accomplishments. I raised our children up. We took them to church. We raised them up in the way they should go. We even homeschooled for some time. And when in school, very involved in school activities, just very involved in their life in all aspects of their lives. Then the oldest grew up and he moved away to another city away from us. And we were still raising our youngest one at home. He was just about to start high school when we got this phone call in the middle of the night. Well, not quite the middle of the night, but close to the middle of the night, that he was involved in a heinous crime and was charged with serious acts. And it just floored me. Then after we went through a period of 9 months until he went through trial and was found guilty and sentenced to a Texas prison, I just became stuck. I got to the point that I did not even want to function. And I only functioned as little as I needed to take care of our son and the household. I did not work outside the home at the time. I did work part-time from home. I even resigned from those positions just so I could be home alone because I was definitely floored by what happened. And I became stuck in life.
Yeah. So if we're not invading too much, I always try to tread delicately on sensitive subjects, right? Are we able to kind of know a little bit? I mean, we don't need to know every nuance of the trial and all of that, and even the crime itself. Is there any way we could know a little bit about why he's in prison? I mean, it wasn't drug related or anything like that, right? What was the reason?
Sure, I'll share. He was hanging out with the wrong kinds of people, and I was concerned that he was hanging out with the kind of people that we didn't raise him to hang out with. And he was using drugs, he was drinking alcohol, and he was doing all the wrong things. And I would pray, and I would ask our prayer group, please pray. And they'd be like, oh, it's all right, Mama, he'll come back. They always do. They always turn around. They always come back. And I've seen plenty of my older friends, I've seen that to be true, that, kids go through their 18, 19, 20-year-olds, act up a little bit, but then they come to their senses because they need to get a real job and they clean up and they come to their senses. And I was praying for that to happen. But when we got this phone call, I felt like life was over because he was charged for murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon as he was with some friends when this tragedy took place. And we didn't know at the time we got the phone call what had transpired, but over the months as we had learned more, he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And because of him being there, he was also found guilty as if he committed the crime.
Wow.
And it just floored me. It just floored me because he had not been in trouble before. We had not had any of those indicators that would be something this serious. It was just never having been in trouble with the law, never have been in any kind of serious, I don't even know if he had any traffic tickets at the time. And it just absolutely floored me because that was not the way we raised our son. That was not the son I knew. So the person that they were portraying on the news, the person that they portrayed in the media, the person that they portrayed in the courtroom, that was not the person I knew.
Wow. So your son is currently still incarcerated for a charge of murder.
Yes, sir. He has served 10 years of a 20-year sentence. He was sentenced to 20 years in a Texas prison.
Wow. Okay. So let's back up a second or so. So as a mom, now I'm not a mom. I'm only a dad. I am a dad of a 14-year-old. I was thinking to myself the other day, is there anything my daughter could ever do that would ever make me stop loving her, ever make me stop supporting her, ever make me just, leave her side in a sense as her father. And I just can't think of anything. I really can't. As a mom, though, because again, I'm not a mom. I'm never going to be a mom. As a mom, was there any wavering with you as far as your support or your love or your any of that for your son? Help me with that.
Not for a moment. I love my son unconditionally. My husband did too. And we have shown him our unconditional love through this from the moment we got the phone call, from the times that we talked to him on the phone, from the time through the whole process, we showed him our unconditional love. And we never stopped supporting him in any way. We wrote to him while he was in county jail before the trial. We wrote him letters. We put money on his phone account so he could call us. We hired an attorney for him. We did everything that we knew to do as loving parents to walk with him through this process, because he needed that emotional support. He needed the legal support. He needed someone to be there with him. And he even testifies to me, because of our unconditional love that we showed him as parents, that it was what drew him to the love of the Father and to surrender his life to Jesus Christ in county jail prior to the trial.
Wow, that's fantastic. Obviously, a great testimony that he will hopefully have one day, Lord willing, that he's able to walk freedom from jail as far as that goes. So I'm just curious about this still, and maybe I'm being too nosy. I don't know. I get in trouble sometimes for this. But I mean, do you blame yourself as a mom? Our kids are going to grow up. They're going to make their choices, and I'm sure I've made some choices and mistakes and some things that my parents are not probably proud of. My mom, of course, is sometimes a faithful listener of the show, so she can, of course, comment and let me know what she thinks on this question. But I mean, do you blame yourself as a parent in some way that you have, and here's the word I was looking for, really failed as a parent because of the results and the choices that your son has made?
Absolutely. My husband and I both went through that phase of the woulda, coulda, shouldas. How could we have changed this? And it was a battle in our minds and in our hearts. We wrestled with it night after night, night after night. But I thank God for his word, because we are faithful to read his word, and we saw it. And I don't know the address right off the top of my head, but it's in Ezekiel somewhere about the sins of the father. The sons are not responsible for the sins of the fathers, and the fathers are not responsible for the sins of their sons. And reading that scripture really started liberating us from that guilt from our son's choices, because he was 21 years old at the time, living off on his own in another town 5 hours away, and he did not have communication with us. Very seldom did he communicate with us. So we were not in touch with him, and we did not know him. We had very little influence in his life at that time, other than the influence that we had prior to him going off on his own.
But in that, I think there's still a little bit of, our kids are always going to be our kids no matter what, right? And they're always going to be, we're always going to be judged on the good and the bads that they do, and I would imagine, again, I've never been to Texas. I have several friends that live there, and I'm still waiting on my plane ticket, Sean McCoy, just a shout out to my friend Sean. But I'm just wondering, like, in Texas society, that's something I'm not even accustomed to, but I've heard there is a thing called, Texas society. Was there any even people at church? I mean, let's face it, our churches are wonderful, but sometimes we have people that judge, even in the church, right? Unfortunately, that's just the way it is, which is sad. Shouldn't be that way. We don't necessarily believe that. I don't believe that as a follower of Jesus, that you should judge inside the church per se. It happens, right? We judge. And we're human. We judge. Do you think there's been judgment from people in your circle, or even maybe outside your circle, that looked at you and not only judged you personally as a mom, like, how dare you, as a mom, didn't you raise him better? I mean, all the things all the naysayers and the noise, did that ever occur as well?
Not to my knowledge in our personal circles. We reached out to our pastor the night we got the phone call, and they were immediately there. The pastor and some other staff were immediately at our home praying with us. They supported us the best they knew how. Our pastor didn't really know where to send us or what to do for us. So he found another woman in the church, which she no longer went to church there, but she had previously went to church there. And he contacted her, and he had her meet me the following day. And I met with her, and we connected, and we've been best friends ever since, or really good friends ever since that connection. He did the best he knew how. And as I shared a little bit with people, I really had more compassion than I had judgment. And in the later months, if there were judgments against us, they kept them to themselves. The only judgments that I saw were in the media and in the courtroom, but I did not personally experience the judgment. Now, as I have talked to other family members who have gone through this, there have been judgments against them. I've heard of people losing their jobs. I've heard of spouses leaving them. I've heard of churches kicking them out. I've heard of those stories happening because I am now more in contact with people who are in situations like that. And so it does happen, but it has not been my personal experience.
And the reason why you can draw from that is because of the nonprofit, right? Because you guys, and when I say you guys, you and your husband started to discover that there weren't any really support groups for families who are kind of left on the periphery, left out of the court situations because you have a loved one in jail, but there is no real support system to help those on the outside. There's probably tons, I would imagine, there's tons of resources on the inside to help the inmate kind of get rehabilitated, get counseling if they need it and all that. But there's none of that on the outside for those that are the victims of the family, right? I mean, is that weird to say that they're a victim of? I don't know how to say that exactly, but I think you follow me, right?
I follow you because I do feel like we're also victims, but I don't want to remain in a victim mentality, a victim situation. But I do feel that we're victims because this was not something we planned. It wasn't something we expected. And we're also victims of this crime. Because, not only did that family who lost their loved one, are they victims and they suffer a great loss, I also suffered a great loss because the life I expected my son to have, go to college, get a great job, marry a godly woman, have grandchildren, give me grandchildren, those dreams shattered, those dreams smashed on the floor the night that he was sentenced to prison. The day he was sentenced to prison, I lost all that expectation. And so that's what caused me to fall into being stuck. And that's what caused depression, anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, condemnation. And I had to surrender to the Lord and sit and read the word day after day after day, and let him rise his word up in me and show me the truth of his word, that he does not condemn. If anyone confesses their sins, God is faithful and just to forgive them of their sins. And that's where my son was at. He had repented. He's been forgiven. He is now serving the Lord in prison. And as he served the Lord in prison ministries would go into the prisons and minister to him and help fill him up and educate him and train him. And we would go visit him in prison. In one of the prisons where he was at, where we went to visit him, we stayed in this hospitality house, which means it's like a big guest home with a whole bunch of rooms and a community bathroom where we didn't have to pay. We can leave a love offering. It was all supported by donation, where we wouldn't have the expense of paying for a hotel. A really nice thing that some of these ministries do in Texas for that. And so we would stay at this hospitality house, and there was prison ministries that stayed there also, and they were going into the prisons, and I would ask them what they were doing, and they would share with me what they're sharing in the prison. And I'd say, well, what about us? Can you help us as the family? And they said, well, that's not how we're structured. That's not how we're set up. Then we would go to our church and we would tell them, well, we went and visited our son, this and this and this is happening. And the language is different because the language of the prison world is different than in our world. It's a whole different language. And I would I found that I would have to explain. And sometimes explaining what other people don't understand becomes exhausting, especially when you're going through something. And so we went to our pastors and we told them what was going on. And they said, why don't you start a group? That was already on our heart anyway. And so they said, why don't you start something? No, there's not anything like that. There's children's ministries, there's singles ministries, there's divorce care, there's Celebrate Recovery. There are all these different groups within different churches for different phases of life that people are going to. But there are 2.2 million prisoners in the United States of America. That's at least 2.2 million families, probably a lot more if you want to estimate it, that are affected by incarceration. But where's the church coming alongside to help them? And so our pastor said, why don't you start a support group? And I'm like, all right, it was in May. And I said, all right, well, let's start this in the fall. I've been teaching Bible studies for a long time. And typically you start a Bible study, you follow the school schedule. That's the best thing to do, is to follow the school schedule, because come along May, people are getting ready for vacation. They go off. They don't, want to go to church groups, church meetings, that kind of thing that tends to fall off in the summertime. All right, well, let's do it in the fall. And she goes, I think you ought to go ahead and start now. I'm like, now? She goes, yeah, next Tuesday. And so they announced it from the pulpit on Sunday. We told a few people about it. That following Tuesday, there were 9 people at that first meeting. And so 9 people showed up just by word of mouth. And so after that, about 6 months later, we did form a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Fortress of Hope Ministries that now we're nationwide. Last year, we pivoted with COVID, went online. We're all virtual. We're not all virtual, but we're mostly virtual. We have monthly support group meetings on Zoom. and new people show up every month. And it's still basically word of mouth because we're not doing advertising. So that's how the ministry started.
Yeah, I just think that's so amazing to think about, that there's this great need. Realistically, there is a need for families to be ministered to because they don't understand the legal aspect of things. Because let's face it, the law is wacky and it's weird, and I've met lawyers from time to time who's like, there's some weird laws on the books still. And to have a kind of advocate, if you will, to come alongside and to join in the muck and the mire and the craziness of the legal system to help support a family. I just think that's so amazing. And I was excited that you guys had kind of taken that on and that baton and really run with it. And it sounds like you're really, making a difference in a lot of people's lives, which to me, there's no greater job than making an impact in someone's life. So I'm wondering about this because you talk about the stuck moment. You talk about how, you had depression, you had some anxiety, you had all of this stuff. And I have a great friend that was just on with us last week, Jody. She has an amazing podcast called The Air That I Breathe. We just had her on last week, and she was talking about, these mental storms of life that come upon us. Almost, I would even say it like a hurricane of a storm, probably, and maybe you would echo that as well. But I'm wondering about this, like, was there a moment, was there a single moment, was there a series of moments, but what really pulled you through it to get to where you are now?
There were a series of moments, but I'll tell you this one that is very memorable. And I was dealing with the despair and depression and shutting myself in and isolating myself. Now, part of me was isolating myself to isolate myself to be with the Lord. But part of me was isolating myself because of the fear, shame, guilt, and fear of judgment, and judgment that wasn't even there because I told you we didn't even personally experience it. But we would go out with our youngest son. He was playing varsity sports, and the conversation would go around like, oh, look what he's doing. Look what, and my son is in college doing this. Do you have any other children? And I would just freeze up. I wouldn't know how to answer. And so part of me wanted to avoid having to figure out how to answer those questions, because when you're in those social settings, everybody's bragging about the good things that their kids are doing, and rightfully so. I don't belittle them for that because I've got another son that's doing great too, and I would brag about him. I do the same thing. So, but when you have one that's in prison, how do you answer? And so for the longest time, I didn't even want to answer. Now I answer. I'll tell them. Sometimes I get a look of shock and they don't know what to say. They'll change the subject. Other times they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And they'll want to know more. So I answer now. But at that time, I couldn't answer. But so I was in this place of darkness. And this woman from church, she called me up and said, I want you to meet me at the church. The pastor told us we can use an empty office. I want you to meet me in that empty office. I want you to meet me over there. And so I went over there and I met her, and I sat in a chair that was up against the wall, and she got down on her knees in front of me and put her hands on my knees, looked at me face to face, got nose to nose, right up to me, and said, Shonda, you have to pull yourself out of this. You cannot stay here. You know where your son is, and you know how he's doing. And then she went on to tell me how for 2 years, she did not know where her adult daughter was. She didn't know if her adult daughter just decided didn't want to talk to her anymore. She didn't know if her adult daughter was dead somewhere. She didn't know in between the extremes of the possibilities where it lied on that scale. For 2 years, she didn't know. She says, at least you know where he is and he's calling you. And that moment of realizing that other people may have circumstances that seem worse than mine pulled me out of that moment of darkness. And I started to see the light, and I started gravitating more and more and more to the light of Christ shining in my life, that he had not given up on me, that I can get in the word and receive his truth, and that I can get out and start talking about it, that I can get out and start participating in life. And as I started participating in life more and more, and the more I even started opening my mouth and talking about it, the more I started getting unstuck.
I just think that's fantastic. Hopefully you knew the lady. I mean, as you're telling me the story, I'm like, I'm really hoping she's just not like somebody you bumped into at the, like, I don't know if your church has like a cafe, like a, like a little Starbucks inside the church, like you bumped into her, like while you're getting your mochaccino or whatever, and she's getting her, caramel frappuccino, whatever. And you're like, oh, hey, How are you? Good, good. I'm hoping you had a relationship with her, so.
We did. Her and her husband were a normal part of our weekly We Led life groups. So at the church we were going to, we had a weekly life groups.
Good.
And our pastor said, you should continue having a weekly life group. Because I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't have a weekly life group because I have a son in prison. I don't know that I'm qualified. And he says, no, you're more than qualified. You keep leading a life group. And so this woman was a part of our life group, but she's older than me, and she took on that motherly role with me at that moment when I needed it. And I will forever be grateful to her. Her name is Rita. So I'll just give her a shout out. Rita, thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I'll thank her as well. Thank you, Rita. We need Ritas in our life. We need people to come along and really, shake us up and really, get us to that stuck moment. Cinderella had the mice. You had Rita. Just saying. Okay. So on this, there has to be, I'm just guessing here again, but there just has to be like lessons that you've learned along the way. I'm just imagining there is. I mean, life is just full of them. But is there been like a greatest lesson moment for you? Again, going back to that moment, was there a lesson that you just really learned more than another?
Well, the greatest lessons I learned was I would sit and read the word, as I mentioned. I would sit and read the word, and there were days that I would just sit and read the word and say, Lord, I don't even want to get up from this couch, because I would read the word on my sofa. I say, I don't even want to get up from this couch until I receive a word from you. Some days I did, some days, I would just have to trust I got something, but some days I would be like, oh, wow, look at this. And what I saw in the scriptures is that from Genesis to Revelation, if they lived in our present day society, they would have criminal history records. They would be labeled as convicts and felons and have these records on their name. And many of these people are in the chapter 11 of Hebrews Hall of Faith chapter. And it's like, wow, look at this. There's hope for my son. So that started filling me with hope that my son, even after prison, if he gets out early on parole or if he has to serve the whole time, I don't know. That's up to God. But when he gets out, that he will have a life on the outside when he's released, because the Lord promises to give us a hope and a future in Jeremiah 29:11. He promises that. God used Moses. Moses, you look at his life, he was set apart. He was spared. He was saved to be king of Egypt and to lead the people out, the Hebrew people out of Egypt later. But what happened in the process, he saw his people being mistreated while he was living as a prince in Egypt, and he took matters into his own hands. One translation of the Bible says he looked to the left and he looked to the right and he murdered the Egyptian. Then he was afraid of Pharaoh, so he fled. So he's a murderer and a fugitive, if you were going to put it in modern day language. And so he lived in the desert for 40 years till God called him back to go back to the same place where he fled from to deliver the people out of bondage. And so that's the hope I have for my son, that he will be used mightily by God to pull people out of bondage. And that gave me great hope. And I could go on. There's King David, there's King Manasseh, there's even Saul of Tarsus. I mean, the list could go on.
You can see it on the Zoom. It probably is not going to come across super well because it's on a dark background, but this shirt that I'm wearing currently says redemption. And I went a step further, and on this bracelet here, which I'm going to kind of hold up to you there, it says redemption. That's pretty cool, right? I mean, redemption. Now, some people might be thinking, big deal, redemption, not a big thing. You got to hang with me for a little bit of a story. A number of years back, I'm a huge University of North Carolina fan. For those that are around me, you guys know that. You've listened to the show enough, you know that. Well, a little ways back, they were in the national championship in back-to-back years. And the first year they were there, they actually lost on a three-point shot at the buzzer. You can go back and look at it. I have still to this day never watched the highlight, and I won't. I saw it live. I don't need to see it again. But it broke my heart. And I know this is a terrible analogy perhaps. But the next year, by the way, they came back and they won it. They won it all, which is really exciting. They actually beat the University of Oregon on their way to beat Gonzaga. So 2 Northwest schools, which is really awkward for me, on their way to win the national championship in basketball. But from what I hear from people around the team, and I even got a chance to interview a former player, they said that they even called it. They had a team chat called redemption. And so that's what this has come from, is redemption. So when I saw the shirt, like immediately my mind did not go to that season where they won it all. My mind went to what Jesus has done for me in redemption. Because I've done some stupid stuff, some bad stuff. Now some may say, well, Neil, you've probably never murdered somebody. You're right. I have not physically ever murdered somebody, but in my thoughts, oh, absolutely I've murdered somebody. Who has not in their thoughts right now? Think about that. Who have you not in their thoughts murdered somebody? I bet you have. And so when I now look at this shirt and I now look at the bracelet, it reminds me that there is a redemption story out there. So for you, because I feel like you've been in this prison too, much like your son has. Now, you're not in a physical prison where there's a warden and there's a, inmates and there's a jail cell, but kind of, not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, you really feel like you have been locked away. So what is your redemption story in this? I say all that to lead this question. What is your redemption story in that?
Well, my redemption story is that the Lord never stopped pursuing me with his love. And I continued to pursue him through his word, through study, through going to church, through worship, through those things, and through prayer. And so the redemption story for me is that through this process, he showed me how to have my heart healed. And it was in that process of getting my heart healed that I got unstuck. And the primary ways to get the heart healed is to release through forgiveness of sins, repenting and asking for forgiveness of sins, forgiving those who have sinned against me. We're familiar with the Lord's Prayer, forgiving those who have hurt me and letting those things go. And those 2 primary things right there set me free. And I felt God's redemption because that's what he did. Jesus did on the cross for us. He shed his blood for the redemption of our sins, the forgiveness of our sins. And by surrendering those things, and then started surrendering our thoughts, which is a day-by-day process, which is a process that I'll probably continue to go through every day the rest of my life. I don't think I've arrived. I don't know that I will until the day we go home or Jesus comes back. It's a continual process for me, the redemption. But not only does he redeem, he's a restorer. And so he has restored life to me by giving me hope for our future. We don't have the hope we're hoping for at this point, but we have the hope that we're helping other families as they go through these trials. We have the hope that we have in him through prayer, and we have hope in God, who is our source of hope. And we have this redemption, and we have this restoration of lives. Now, the life may not be like I imagined it, but God says he does more than we can think or imagine. And so I'm stepping into the life he has for us. And right now, even though I expected to have grandkids, on Mother's Day, I put something on Mother's Day. I went out and rode a dirt bike for the first time. Okay. Said, since I'm an empty nester and I don't have grandchildren, here's what I'm doing on Mother's Day. Well, then somebody posted on that post of me riding a dirt bike, and y'all can go see it on my Facebook page if you want to. I made it public so everybody can see it. If you go back to May, of me riding a dirt bike, and somebody posted on there, you may be an empty nester, but you're a mother to many. And that touched my heart. I did not expect anything like that I'm a mother to many just because I'm helping families that are going through this. That just blew my mind. That blew my mind. So God is forming my life, restoring my life, and shaping it in a way that I did not expect. But his ways are greater than my ways. His ways are higher than my ways. And he promises to do more than we can think or imagine.
That's fantastic. I love that. I just absolutely do. I love that. I love the fact that there is such a redemption part of it. There just is. And so anyway, super excited to hear that. So here's my question leading into that. I mean, obviously you're a person of faith. You talk about, you've been a Bible teacher for, 15 plus years, probably longer than that, probably most of your life, I would imagine, just officially maybe in that capacity for 15 years or so. Because I always think about this. this. Like, if Jesus wasn't in my life, it would look like what? So I would ask you that question. If Jesus wasn't in your life would look like what?
Well, I can answer that one pretty easily because I joked around with my husband about that while we were going through the trial. I would joke around, if Jesus wasn't holding me together, I think I would be in an insane asylum. Jesus, it says in Colossians that he holds everything together. So he's holding me together, and he has been, and he held me together. He's the glue in my life that keeps me together. I would have fallen apart. I would have allowed that darkness to take over me, and I don't know where I would have been. I don't know where I'd been. But I thank God that I didn't go there.
Now, on that, people that come to the nonprofit to get help and to get some I'm guessing some resources, some just support, whatever it may be, that your nonprofit kind of serves all the needs of the people, whatever those needs may be. Now, does a person have to be of faith to come be a part of that, or maybe speak to that?
No, anyone can come. We are a faith-based organization, and our primary focus is the Word of God and prayer. That is our primary focus, but anyone is welcome to come. And so they're welcome. And they can go to the website, fortressofhopeministries.com, to get the information. So we provide support and resources. I wrote a book as a prayer book for prisoners and their families that you mentioned in the intro. And the reason I wrote that book was to point out the role of praying in the courtroom of heaven, who the people are, who the defendant is, who the advocate is. The advocate is Jesus Christ, who the prosecutor is, which is Satan. Because based on Revelation 12, 10 and 11, the accuser accuses us day and night before God. So Satan is the accuser. He's the prosecutor. And how we approach the throne of grace and how we can approach it at any time, any day. And so I wrote that book that explains the courtroom of heaven prayer. I learned that first through Robert Henderson Ministries, and he teaches on the courts of heaven. I just took it and applied the courts of heaven as it applies to prisoners and prison families. And not only that, in the third section of the book, I included sample prayers based on scriptures so that they're there to pray. So if you don't know what to pray or when to pray, if you need prayer for addictions or where you're going to live or how to use your gifts or trusting God or finding peace or knowing what God's will is for yourself or those kinds of things, I put those in the book.
That's fantastic. I love it. I always love this question when we ask people to come on the show. We have a series of questions we ask everyone. And one of the things I love that we've kept on there for almost 3 years now of doing this, we keep this question on there, and I will continue to keep it on there because I just think it's so valuable. So here's the question. We always ask, like, what is a quote or saying that really speaks to your heart, that really speaks to who you are? And you gave us one actually from your family crest, if I got that right, which says this. It says, "As long as I have breath, I have hope." Why does that mean so much to you? I mean, obviously I know it's in the family, so maybe that has some meaning there, but in light of what we're talking about, as long as I have breath, I have hope.
Well, that is important to me because prior to all this, prior to my son getting in trouble, I wrote a Bible study on the book of Hosea, all 14 chapters of the book of Hosea. And Hosea is about grace. And I'm talking about God's redeeming grace, talking about the redemption, his redeeming grace. And all through that study, I wrote, while we have breath, we have grace. And so that was the primary quote that I used in that book. Well, after this happened with my son, and anytime I started sharing, teaching, or speaking on it, I switched that saying from, while we have breath, we have hope. Well, I did not know that was the Whitworth family motto until a few weeks ago when someone challenged me to research the Whitworth family name. And so I researched the name, and it was only a few weeks ago that I found that that is the motto. While I breathe, I hope. So the quote, while I have breath, I have hope, I had already been using, unbeknownst, not even realizing that it was part of the Whitworth heritage. So that's really significant to me. So
I just think that's cool. I love stories like that of how we, come across stuff and things like that. So that's awesome. So a couple of questions and then we'll kind of try to wrap up here. I'm just thinking about, because I'm always thinking about other people I mean, maybe that's why the show's called Other People's Shoes, is because I am always thinking about other people and how people live and how people breathe and, you know, what's going on in their life. I love that you have filled a need, again, for so many families. And you've, you know, to quote Facebook, the Facebook user that said that, you know, you're a mother to many, right? You obviously have walked in their shoes. You've walked to where they've walked. You may not have the same feelings and experiences, but man, you sure know their pain at least. But I'm wondering, have you ever thought for a moment, and maybe it's too dark to go down, but have you ever put yourself back in that mom's shoes of the victim, of the mom, in any way?
I did. For many dark nights, I put myself there and I question, how can I love my son? I understand there's a significant grief that I don't relate to that they have, but I also have a grief for losing a son also to the prison system. And it is very, very tragic. And I wrestled with it and I wrestled with it and I wrestled with it, to the point that I finally had to stop looking at the media. I had to stop looking at that and only look at the Word of God, so that I wouldn't go to those dark places. And I would pray for their healing. I continue to pray for their healing. And as a matter of fact, because of that, even in the book, I included a prayer for victims and victims' families. So my son's case is not the only case that includes victims. So in the prayer book, I included prayer for victims and their families. I felt that was important to always pray for them.
Again, I think it is so important to pray for people, because I think so many times as a believer or, you know, a person of faith, we say so often, oh, I'll pray for you. And we walk away from them and we don't pray for them. That's a pet peeve I have. You know, I try to pray for not making me cooler than someone else, but I try to pray in that moment because I just know I'm going to get busy and I'm going to forget. And so I really try very hard when I come across people who say, hey, will you pray for me? I just say, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it right now. You know, I just do it right then. So I think that's awesome. If you had an opportunity somehow, again, I never know where the show's going to go. I know it's really big in India, so I do know it goes there. But as far as the reach and where it hits and whose earbuds they're in, or who's, who's listening to us right now while they're jogging or, folding laundry, I don't know, or driving to work, I don't know. But somehow, some way, this episode specifically gets into the earbuds or comes across the path of the mom of the victim of the crime that your son committed. What would you say to her in this moment? I'm going to give you that opportunity to really say that. And then I have one question that we're going to close with. So if you could talk to her right now, what would you say to her?
I would say to her, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have no excuse. I'm so sorry. And I'm praying for you. There's no other words I can say except I'm sorry.
And I always wonder, I wonder what her response would be or their response would be in that, because you never know, and I just feel like in the sorry, I think it's very genuine for you to say that. I mean, again, you're not the one that caused the pain, but it's still great that you can still be okay with saying, I'm sorry. Obviously you can't change it either. I can't change it.
Change it.
But you can at least acknowledge the fact that they had pain in that and say, listen, I'm sorry that my family caused that pain, That's really awesome of you to be able to do that. So last question. So here it is. We'll kind of change the tone in the room a little bit. You have, I'm hoping, otherwise this might fall flat. I'm guessing you've probably heard of Jones AT&T Stadium, maybe time or two, maybe been there a few times.
A few times, and we drive by it. It's right there. It's big.
For those that don't know, that is where the Texas Tech Red Raiders play their football games. So just without Googling it, here we go. We're going to put your Red Raider trivia to the test here. That is not the game we're playing, but we're leading up to that. So without Googling, do you know the seating capacity of said stadium?
I would have to guess close to 50,000.
Okay. You're close-ish. 60,454 people.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
It's big.
That's a lot of people. Everything's bigger.
I guess I didn't count those VIP seats.
The boosters, the donors, the Patrick Mahomeses of the world, right? Everything's bigger in Texas. I've heard that. So with that, I'm wondering, somehow we get you on the 50-yard line, which would be terrifying. By the way, the game is not going on when this occurs, but we created this event for you. You're on the 50-yard line. I hand you the microphone. We got people from all walks of life who have been affected by somebody being in prison, a loved one, maybe a relative, an uncle, a sister, whoever. and their crimes, the crimes don't matter, but they're there as family members of those victims. Victim of people's choices. Again, 60,454 people. In that moment, what would you say to them?
I would say never give up and always pray. Like Jesus said in Luke 18:1, always pray and never give up hope. And it goes back to our family motto, while we have breath, we have hope. And we have hope in that redemption. We have hope in the restoration through our Lord Jesus Christ. So we always have that hope. And not to ever give up on the incarcerated, no matter how long they're sentenced. We share with families all the time that their sons have had life sentences. We know a man who had 2 life sentences, and his mom prayed, and he is now out in the free world. God does open prison doors regardless of what the system puts on paper. If God says it's time to come out, he'll open the door for a person to come out, and he decides the timing. And so that's how we pray, that God has the timing, and we pray for his timing and his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that would be my message in a nutshell to those 60,000 people.
Do you think they would listen?
I don't know. I don't have control over other people's choices. I've been learning that through all this. I don't have control over their choices.
Why do you think that's such an important lesson for us to remember? Not only us, but you personally.
So that I don't take on the responsibility of having the answers for them. I could share what I know. I could share the hope that the Lord's given me. But the outcome is up to him. And that removes the burden from me of feeling like I have to do anything more, of feeling like I'm responsible for it. And that frees me from the stress, the shame, the guilt, the condemnation that comes along with trying to fix everybody else, because I can't fix everybody else. I can only work on me.
Well, and I think that's so important, right? Because so many times we say, well, we need to do this. Well, we have to have this change. Well, we need to, fight against this injustice or that injustice. But really, we need to flip that we upside down and really make it a me.
Oh, that's good.
I just came up with that. I just came up with that. I don't know. I just was thinking about that because I thought so many times, like we say, well, we as a church, well, we. It's like we're weing all over the place, and really we want to come back to me. It really needs to come back to me. What am I? What is the me and me? Which I know sounds weird to say, the me and me. But what is the me going to do about it?
Right. Because we're responsible for ourselves. When we stand before the judge of the heavens and earth, he's not going to say, what did you all do? What did you do as we? But what about you? Is he going to say, well done, good and faithful servant? That was singular at that moment. It's not good and faithful servants. We're stand individually before him. And so I could work on my heart. I could work on my character and my right standing with the Lord and make those choices I need to make to be in right standing with him. And I can share what he tells me to share.
All right. So this is our game. It's called Senseless. And so, it's how we end every show. And so as a mom, I'm guessing you've probably boo-booed up or bandaged up some senses a time or two. So we have how many, just for the record?
Senses? 5 senses.
That is correct. That is not the game, by the way, but good that you know that. People have questioned whether we have 5. I've heard as many as 10 senses, which I'm like, I don't even know how that works. Here's our game, Senseless. The famous North Carolina Cup. I don't know. Maybe the Red Raider Cup was on back order. I'm not sure. But anyway, here we go. I'm going to roll because you're still in Texas and I'm in Oregon. So here we go. Oh, this is so good. I love it when the die tells us what we're doing. So there is the number. Tell us what the number is just so people don't think I'm cheating.
Is that a 2 or an upside down 5?
That is a 2, not an upside down 5. It is weird though, but that's what the 5 looks like, just to be clear. So
okay.
There's the 5 and then there is the 2. So
you rolled a 2.
I rolled a 2. Well, you rolled a 2 because I was your proxy roller. So here we go. So number 2 is this. This is so just, I love it when it's almost like the die has been listening to our conversation. It happens from time to time, which I know that's impossible because dies
Is
don't
it
have.
like casting lots or something?
Something like that, yeah. It almost like knows what's going on, like a Jonah situation, like you're the one that needs to go over the boat. Kind of, it's very similar. It's very weird. I'm just saying, it's very weird. So here we go. Who is touching your life right now?
Who is touching my life right now? I would have to say my husband. He is my best friend for 33 years. We've been married 33 years, as you mentioned at the beginning, in June. And every morning we get up and read the Bible together and pray together. And he tells me things that I don't really listen to, and I go pay a coach for. And then I tell him, oh, my coach said this. He goes, I've been telling you that. And I thought, you're right. Maybe I should just listen to you. I could save a lot of money on coaches. And so he is touching my life right now.
That's fantastic. That's good stuff. So, well, that's awesome. So that's our game Senseless. So there we go.
I thank you for allowing me to share here on this podcast.
Well, I was just going to say that. You kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but that's okay. But I thank you for coming on, right? Because this is a tough subject. This is an absolutely tough subject. I wish we could get your son on to get his perspective and say, what do you think about what mom's been doing for you? I know there's another son that you have. You have two sons, as we mentioned at the intro. And the other son has dealt with some challenges too we could have had probably another episode on that. But the thing that I would tell you and that I really love is that your heart for a mom to say, you know what, whose other babies, because my mom says this to me all the time, no matter where I go, no matter how old I am, I'm always going to be the baby because I'm the baby of the family. So that's why she says that. But I'm always going to be her baby, not again everyone else's baby, but her baby. But what a great role you've stepped in. What a great opportunity you have stepped in, you and your husband both. And I give you kudos for that. If you carry that message to your husband for me, I would love that. Here's an opportunity. I just want to share this so we're super clear. So if people are hearing you right now, again, that Texas Tech encounter, right? They came out of that event and they're like, man, we just got to get involved. How can somebody get involved and know not only where to get the book? We'll of course link it on our website, Books That I Love. We'll have a link there. But where else can people go to hear from you and learn about you and what you're all about?
They can go to the ministry website at fortressofhopeministries.com. And there's a way to connect with me on that website. They can click contact and it comes right to my email. Or they can search for me by name, Shonda Whitworth. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Clubhouse. I'm not so much on Twitter these days, but I'm on all the Facebook, Instagram, and Clubhouse.
Gotcha. Awesome. So we, of course, will put a link in our show notes for that. So if you guys are wondering where that is, you don't have to write it down right this second. You can go to the show notes. They'll be there. So, well, thank you so much again for coming on. We really appreciate it. We love what you shared, and we're just super excited to have you on. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. As we close out today, I just want to say this. Is there a prison cell that you've been locked inside? Is there maybe a passion? Is there maybe a vision? Is there maybe something that you feel like, you know what? I can't go and do that. I'm too scared. I'm just going to be locked in my tower. I'm just going to stay there forever. I'm not going to leave because it's safer there. Well, let me tell you, the young lady we had on today, fantastic share. Now, I know we can't put a judgment on someone else's actions. We just can't. So if you're already sitting in action and judgment, you might want to check your heart. Just saying. Just check your heart on that one. But I do want to leave you with this thought. If there's something that you've been locked inside and been wanting to do but haven't, what is stopping you? What is stopping you? Because maybe this is the moment where you finally say, okay, enough is enough. It's time to get up, dust myself off, and go. Let that be your challenge today. And if you take me up on that challenge, please, of course, let me know. opspodcast.com. Leave me a little link, little voicemail there if you want, or even a little, comment. Hey, Neil, I took you seriously on that. I did this. Here's what I did. I'd love to know that. I really would. And just remember this as we close out today. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we again walk in other people's shoes.